If you cannot accept how this family works, you can pack your things and get out of my house." My mother's voice was entirely cold. She did not blink. My older sister destroyed the future I had spent 3 years building, and my parents simply handed her the matches. I was 17 when they drained the $12,000 I had saved for nursing school, told me Beatrice needed it more, and watched me walk out into the freezing Indiana night with one single backpack. Then came 5 years of absolute, suffocating silence. Thank you for watching this video. Before I take you back there, do me one small favor. Take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. It helps more than you know. My name is Genevieve, and I am 22 years old. In my family, I was always the invisible beast of burden, the one expected to carry the weight while my sister wore the crown. Growing up in the manicured suburbs of Indianapolis, our house looked absolutely flawless from the sidewalk. We had perfectly trimmed hedges and an immaculately painted porch. But inside, it was a completely different kingdom. My sister, Beatrice, was the golden child. She was 5 years older than me, effortlessly beautiful and endlessly chaotic. Beatrice left a trail of destruction wherever she walked. Maxed out credit cards, crashed cars, and disastrous relationships. But my parents, Lenora and Orson, never held her accountable. They constantly rushed in to soften her landing. They called her fragile. They called me the strong one. That was the trap. I started working as a diner waitress when I was 14. I learned quickly that no one was coming to save me, so I had to save myself. I worked double shifts every weekend. I smelled like stale coffee and bleach for 3 years. I saved every single dollar, stuffing cash into a joint bank account my mother had to open for me because I was underage. I reached $12,000. That money was my escape route. It was my tuition for nursing school. It was my only ticket out of a house where my worth was measured solely by what I could do for my sister. Little did they know, I was quietly building armor they could never penetrate. The winter I turned 17, the illusion of my family completely shattered. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift. My feet were throbbing. I walked to the local bank branch to deposit my tip money. The teller, a kind older woman who knew me by name, printed my receipt. I looked down at the slip of paper. The balance was zero. Utterly, completely zero. I stood there, absolutely frozen. My heart slammed against my ribs. I asked her to check again. She looked at her screen with a pitying expression and told me that the joint account holder, my mother, had withdrawn the entire balance 2 days prior. I ran the 3 miles back to our house. The cold wind burned my lungs. I burst through the front door, still wearing my greasy uniform. My mother, my father, and Beatrice were sitting around the kitchen table, drinking tea as if it were a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. The mask of our perfect family slipped in that very moment, revealing the predators underneath. "Where's my money?" I demanded. My voice shook with absolute rage. My mother slowly set her teacup down. She looked completely undisturbed. "Beatrice needed it. You have time to earn it back." There was no apology, no hesitation. Beatrice had gotten herself tangled up with a predatory lender to fund a lavish vacation, and the debt collectors were threatening to sue her. To save the golden child from facing a single consequence, my parents had sacrificed my entire life's savings. I stared at Beatrice. She did not even have the decency to look guilty. She just looked annoyed. I screamed at them. I demanded they give it back. I told them I would go to the police. That was when my father stood up. He did not stand to comfort me. He stood to protect his empire. "You will do no such thing," he ordered. "You are not going to embarrass this family. Your sister made a mistake, and we fix things as a family." My mother slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a handwritten note stating I had willingly gifted the money to Beatrice. She handed me a pen. She told me to sign it or leave. I looked at the 3 of them, sitting together, a united front of profound selfishness. They thought they had trapped me. They thought I would surrender because I was a child. I did not say a word. I turned around, walked up the stairs, and grabbed a duffel bag. I packed a few pairs of jeans, my work shoes, my social security card, and my toothbrush. I walked back down the stairs. My father looked away. Beatrice inspected her fingernails. My mother opened the front door and pointed to the street. "You're the strong one, Genevieve," she said coldly. "Survive." The door slammed shut. I was 17, entirely broke, and standing on a frozen sidewalk. But as I walked away into the dark, a strange, absolute calm washed over me. I had lost my money, but I was finally free. You can survive almost anything when you realize the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. 5 years passed. 5 years of grueling, bone-crushing work. I took out immense student loans. I worked nights as a janitor while attending nursing school during the day. I ate oatmeal for dinner. I slept on a mattress on the floor of a tiny, drafty apartment. But it was my apartment. Nobody could walk in and steal my security. By the time I was 22, I was a registered nurse. I worked at a major hospital in Indianapolis. I had a clean record, a stable income, and a peaceful life. In all those 5 years, I never received a single phone call from my parents. No birthday cards. No text messages. I was completely dead to them, a discarded tool they no longer had a use for. Until a rainy Tuesday evening in November. I was sitting in the hospital break room, drinking terrible instant coffee, when my cell phone vibrated. The caller identification displayed my mother's name. I stared at it. The screen illuminated the dark room. For a fraction of a second, the terrified 17-year-old girl inside me wanted to answer and hear that they loved me. But the woman I had become knew better. I answered the phone. My mother did not say hello. She was sobbing hysterically. Her voice was frantic, breathless, and utterly desperate. "Genevieve," she gasped. "Beatrice has no one else. Mabel needs a place to stay." Mabel was my sister's 5-year-old daughter. I had never even met her. I felt the air grow icy in my lungs. My mother begged me to come home, crying that the family was falling apart. Little did they know, they were speaking to a completely different person now. I did not rush to my car. I did not drive to their perfectly manicured house. Instead, I used the skills I had developed working in a hospital. I knew exactly how systems worked. I made a few quiet phone calls to the county services and checked public arrest records. The truth was absolutely staggering. Beatrice had not just made a mistake. She had been arrested at 2 in the morning. She had left 5-year-old Mabel completely alone in a filthy apartment while she drove across the state line with a trunk full of illegal narcotics. The police had pulled her over. Child Protective Services had been called. Mabel was currently in emergency state custody. My sister was facing severe criminal charges, and the state was threatening to permanently sever her parental rights. My parents had not called me because they missed me. They called me because they were terrified of the scandal. They needed a clean, respectable, financially stable relative to take temporary custody of Mabel so she would not go into the foster system. They needed my spotless background check. They needed my nursing credentials. They needed the exact future they had tried to destroy 5 years ago. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I answered, keeping my voice completely monotone. She quickly outlined her grand scheme. She told me I needed to file the paperwork immediately. I would take Mabel into my apartment just for the inspections. Once the state backed off, Beatrice would move in with me, secretly, so they could bypass the legal restrictions. My mother spoke with immense entitlement, as if she were ordering from a menu. When she finished, there was a heavy silence on the line. And then I started laughing. I laughed so hard my chest physically ached. I laughed until tears streamed down my face in that sterile hospital break room. It was the laughter of pure, profound realization. "What is so funny?" my mother snapped, her facade of desperation cracking into sheer anger. I stopped laughing. My voice turned to pure ice. "You are not getting my apartment. You are not using my license. I am not your shield." I hung up the phone. I blocked her number. I did not block it to hide. I blocked it to prepare for war. The very next morning, I drove directly to the precinct and met with the federal social worker assigned to the case. Her name was Valerie. I sat in her drab, fluorescent-lit office and laid everything on the table. I provided my pay stubs, my lease agreement, and my nursing credentials. And then I told her the absolute truth. I told her about my parents' scheme to harbor a fugitive. I warned her that Beatrice would try to circumvent the probation restrictions by using my parents' address. Valerie took meticulous notes. She scheduled an immediate home inspection of my apartment. When she arrived, she found a meticulously clean, safe environment. I had already set up a small bedroom for Mabel. I will take full guardianship of the child, I told Valerie, looking her dead in the eye. But I am filing for a strict protective order. My sister and my parents are not permitted on my property. I will save the child. But I will not cover for the mother. Valerie nodded. 2 days later, a federal judge signed the emergency placement warrant. Mabel was brought to my door. Mabel was tiny, fragile, and utterly terrified. She walked into my apartment like a prey animal waiting for the predator to strike. For the first 2 weeks, she asked for permission to use the bathroom. She asked for permission to drink tap water. One evening, while we were eating dinner, her elbow slipped. She knocked her glass of milk onto the floor. The glass shattered. Mabel completely crumbled. She dropped to her knees, shaking violently, throwing her hands over her head. She was hyperventilating, waiting for a beating. I knelt down slowly. I did not yell. I gently pulled her hands away from her face. "It is just milk, sweetie," I said softly. "Accidents happen. We will just clean it up together." Later that night, I was putting away her laundry when I found a small, dirty backpack shoved deep under her bed. I unzipped it. Inside was a single box of dry crackers, a torn jacket, and a plastic water bottle. It was a survival kit. She was 5 years old, and she was already packed to be abandoned. The memory of my own duffel bag on the frozen sidewalk slammed into my chest. I sat on the floor and wept quietly. In that moment, I swore an absolute oath that my family's generational curse would end completely with me. Little did they know, their golden child was about to lose everything. When my parents and Beatrice realized they had been completely outmaneuvered, they lost their minds. They had assumed I would blindly follow orders. Instead, the court had issued a formal injunction. Beatrice was barred from unsupervised contact. My parents were furious that they had lost control of the narrative. One Sunday afternoon, a heavy pounding shook my front door. I looked through the peephole. My mother, my father, and Beatrice were standing on my porch, their faces twisted with immense rage. I did not open the door all the way. I left the heavy brass chain engaged. "Give me my daughter, you vindictive witch!" Beatrice screamed, clawing at the doorframe. My mother shoved her face toward the crack. Her mask was completely gone, revealing the sheer ugliness underneath. "You planned this. You have been holding a grudge for 5 years, waiting to steal her child. You are tearing this family apart." I looked at them. I felt absolutely nothing. No fear. No longing. Just cold, clinical detachment. "I am not stealing anything," I said, my voice dead flat. "I am cleaning up the wreckage you endorsed. You have an active restraining order. Step off my property." "You owe us," my father yelled. "I owe you absolutely nothing," I replied. "Now get off my porch before I call the sheriff's department and have all 3 of you arrested for violating a federal mandate." I slammed the door. I threw the deadbolt. The sound echoed like a gunshot. They stood outside screaming for 2 more minutes before scurrying back to their SUV and speeding away. The final custody hearing took place 6 months later inside a sterile county courtroom. My parents hired an expensive attorney, trying to paint me as an unstable, jealous sister. But they could not manipulate a federal judge. Valerie took the stand. She presented the staggering evidence. She produced Beatrice's failed drug tests. She presented the forged documents my parents had tried to submit to the estate board. Then, the judge reviewed my spotless record. My steady employment. The testimony from Mabel's new school teachers about how she was finally thriving, smiling, and speaking in full sentences. The judge struck his gavel. The sound shattered my parents' empire entirely. He permanently revoked Beatrice's parental rights. He granted me full, irrevocable custody of Mabel. He also issued a permanent no-contact mandate against my parents, citing their attempts to commit perjury to protect a felon. As the bailiff read the final decree, the color completely drained from Beatrice's face. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing loudly. My mother buried her face in her hands. My father stared straight ahead, utterly humiliated in a public courtroom. They had finally encountered a boundary that their entitlement could not cross. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and walked out of the courtroom without giving them a single backward glance. It has been 4 years since that day. I am 26 now. I am sitting in my bright, warm living room. Mabel is 9 years old, and she is currently in the backyard, laughing loudly as she practices her ballet routines. She no longer hides a survival bag under her bed. Her bedroom is filled with books, paintings, and the absolute certainty that she is fiercely loved and entirely safe. I heard through the grapevine that Beatrice ultimately violated her probation and was sent to the county jail. My parents had to mortgage their perfect, manicured house to pay off her mounting legal restitution. Their pristine facade completely crumbled, exposing the rot underneath. They're entirely alone now. I built a beautiful, peaceful life that none of their money could ever buy, and I did it using the very strength they tried to exploit. You see, when they threw me out into the cold and told me to survive, they made a fatal miscalculation. They forgot that wolves are born in the winter. If you are the one carrying the weight for a toxic family, ask yourself this: what would happen if you simply set the burden down and walked away? Have you ever had to cut ties to save yourself? I want to read your stories. Thank you for tuning into this channel. If this story of reclaiming your life and watching absolute justice unfold resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served.